Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for attending in whatever manner you've chosen. Roll call and declaration of a quorum. I'll run through the list of members. Richard Heisey. Absent. Peter Argentine.
Here.
Janya Elias.
Here.
Kelly Ogrodnik. Bennett Aiken.
Here.
Rob Mackey. Here. That is it. So we have a quorum. We have a quorum. We're good to go. All right. Check over with Sandy. Sandy, you just listening? Your any comments tonight?
I'm just listening. Thank you.
No citizen comments. Number 3, approval of November minutes.
Rob, I had a comment on the minutes.
Yes, please.
It said that I had mentioned after the citizen comments that, let's see, I don't have it exactly in front. Well, actually I do. Sorry. Just a slight correction. It says, Mr. Argentine said information regarding the trees to be taken down has been available. A detailed plan had been previously reviewed with people from the community, making sure the sled path remains usable and addressing the tree canopy. I'm not sure I was the one that said that actually, but the larger point is, I think I made a larger point, which was that perhaps we should consider, even though there had been planning and also the notices sent out. As you know, I wasn't, I thought that there should have been some changes to how the notice was written. And I just, not that that needs to be in the minutes, but I did make the larger point that perhaps we should look at this incident to explore in the future how we might better communicate. You know, clearly there seemed to be a problem with some of the neighbors that they were emotional about. So while we did communicate, you know, I think, you know, I'm always for trying to do things better the next time, even if we did it well in the current time. So I kind of would like that just, I don't, slightly reworded to be, maybe Mr. Argentine said information regarding the trees to be taken down had been available or has been available. But he suggested we could explore in the future how to better communicate with the community.
Got it.
That was the larger point I was trying to make at that time. Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes? Okay. So, Peter, on that topic, are you suggesting we maybe have like a 10-minute post-mortem on Williamsburg tree communication and try to look for some process improvements, or?
Or it could wait till the next time we come up.
Okay.
We have a lot on our agenda, so I leave that up to you, Rob. I mean, communications is one of the issues that kind of falls together with signage and also
How about this?
I do definitely think it depends on what we discuss in our priorities, but I definitely think we can do better with park communications as far as maps and telling people where the parks are, where to park and things like that, beyond just the signage. But that's a larger discussion, as you know.
Perhaps Williamsburg is then an example. If we get into a discussion in communications, this can be an example to look at.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Peter. Richard, welcome. We count Richard as here. All right. I see him. And,
A long drive to get here now.
Okay, no other? So motion to approve the minutes. Approve the minutes.
Second,
Thank you. Okay, this is the first of a couple of changes to the sort of the sequence of agenda items. I'll tell you the reason I put facilities and grounds maintenance updates, Phil, earlier in the schedule. I find that sometimes we will talk about things that Phil has the answer to, but we play him to the end of the meeting before we can hear from him. So this might knock some stuff off our internal lists if we put him forward. So
That works for me. Couple quick, December's a crazy end of year time. In the facilities and parks world, it's more of a fast forward than a relax for a couple weeks. But that being said, the items that are noteworthy for progress, stump grinding in Williamsburg has been going very well considering conditions of freeze thaw, mud hard. And then snowfall and identifying stumps to make sure that no one's running into them. So we've been navigating that whole package up there. We worked from the bottom up naturally just to make sure that winter recreation, I'll call it, isn't impacted, and we remove as much of those stumps as we could. So we're down to about 20 at the moment. After that's done, if the weather's still good, we will power wash sidewalks off. We're not going to keep doing it every single day, but we did make a commitment to make sure we clean that up. We've been addressing the ground as best we can as we go. So each time we go in the site, when we leave, we try to leave 0 ruts, holes, gouges, anything like that, where if we have a month of snow and we're shut down from stump grinding, we're not, making a hazard out there for everybody.
how are you doing that?
Crazy, but it's working. So,
If you look at the ground right now, it's just by looking at it, it's probably so soft.
yeah, it's tough over there. But that's going well. Been in communications with Kelly real quick to finalize spring tree for those couple specimen trees that can be cut and should be planted now. Some of the red oaks, stuff like that we were looking at. Each side of Williamsburg kind of had, I want to say about 5, I think we had about 5 to 7 more trees in that main thoroughfare, and that was sort of it. And we're gonna, look at future years and see where our canopy takes us, not to crowd everything out. Some of the maples that were installed were around the edges, places where we don't need the best turf health to address, the concerns that you guys had brought up, which helped us place them, in the right spots. So that's going good. The grant work for Dixon Field outfield fencing, backstop fencing, that got punted to 23. I just couldn't get it done this year. Not a problem. I got until June of 23 for that. So that'll wrap up all brand new fencing at Dixon Field. And then going into this year, we'll start looking at, I believe funding. I have funding to oversurface Martha's Playground, upper and lower. That eliminates all of the poured in place rubber that you see that's cracking apart, tripping hazards. It's the best value, I think, for what we have up there. The play equipment, all repair parts have been ordered. If the weather stays like this, we'll be fixing playground stuff, which is nice. We don't get into that too much this time of year, but so that'll be going on. And slowly we'll be refreshing trash and recycling cans. Not really something anyone sees, but through the winter, the guys will go take 3 pavilions worth of cans back to the shop. We'll relogo them. This year we've done, instead of the stickers, the outdoor stickers that are coming off, we're going to use recycling inlays, paint over them. Everything will be clearly marked. Recycling trash makes our signage in the shelters are up to date. If anything was cracked or broken, we replace it. So just kind of those little odds and ends things, but that's it for now on the maintenance end.
Kelly is not here, but she sent me some notes since you mentioned Williamsburg. The question he presents is, should the list of additional trees be communicated or this, what we have was Princeton elm, white oak, shagbark, hickory, serviceberry, 2 each. Does everybody? I think we've collaborated on this. We're all good with this. And is that locked in then?
No, I don't have a tree order placed yet, so
Okay,
I'm waiting to hear from her and I'll be working with her.
okay.
This is based off the planting plan that,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
I think
So,
for communicating the neighborhood, if you get a species, most people will just say, we could say shade trees and flowering trees. So there's, 8 large shade trees being, or the tree would be shade trees or something of that nature, I think. And the one concern that they did mention was about the one tree to be relocated because it's in like one of the small sledding paths that's used.
That one's gone.
Okay, you got that already. So that was the most actionable item they had, other than, hey, we would like to know, but I think we all agree, there's not much we could have changed in how it evolved. I think part of the issue too was the first work was done and communicated and the pandemic hit, and then the project went on pause. And so we did do a fair amount of communications in the 2020 timeframe, 19, and then there was that pause because of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden it happened, and people were like, well, what just happened?
so,
I think the situation is ameliorated now too, with Kelly in direct contact with the neighborhood representatives there. So, yep. So that's nice that was addressed as well.
so, I get your point. Species specific might be a little bit too detailed.
Yeah.
Just the messages and the considerations from the community came in, and looked at the existing plan, looked at the existing trees. Additional trees are ordered based on.
They'll be filling in over the next couple of years.
Okay.
I have been leaving posts with, common name scientific written on there. If they're removed, someone remove them, but I've been keeping them tight to the trunk, just in case anyone's taking a stroll, they can read what's there if the tag came off or whatever, but.
Okay. Great. Is that all topics covered?
Yeah, the seed starter, everything to restore the lawn areas, has already been purchased. So we were able to get everything on or under budget for that project last calendar year. So there won't be expenses this year associated with that. That's more of like a finance guy question that I'm getting right now, but we're ready to go when the conditions present themselves to restore the lawn. So
Okay.
I know that'll be the eager when is
Yeah.
that happening, so.
Excellent. Does anyone have any maintenance items that they've noticed in the parks lately that they haven't already contacted Phil about? Does anyone have anything?
Just one large tree came down across one of the paths of Bird Park. I don't know if you guys already got it or not.
I don't think we
With
did
that
that.
windstorm, it was a large locust. I mean, it's big.
I think from the
It's-
Mayfair side, right?
Yeah, it came and it's right across the trail. And
I have-
there's nowhere to go around. So I don't know if other parks, that was a pretty, solid long-term windstorm if other parks had major trees. Sure, you guys had your handfuls from that.
Peter?
Yeah, I had a few things. And Phil, I guess, I don't know if you, again, would prefer I text you or email these or go through them, but it happened over the holidays, so I thought I'd bring it up. I didn't want to bother you over the holidays. In Bird Park, that box is still there on the railing near the shelter that says "You are a human being." My wife and I stopped there when walking one day and went through some of them, and we pulled out some. There's obscenities on some, and some that promote drug use, and some are actually pretty despairing. It almost seems like if it were to be left up, you'd almost need outreach to have some brochures there. And there was one even that said, well, I don't even want to say it. It was really nasty. And then some political. So I think that box really should be taken down. There's some nice touchy-feely things in there about the woods and nature, but it's not
Peter,
really
is
a
there
sanctioned thing.
Do you have any idea how it got there? Who's responsible?
No.
No.
but it looks like it's been there for several years and,
We'll just put it up. I mean, we do have a leave no trace policy in the nature parks. So that's whether it's trailblazing, signs, even, what the Nature Conservancy, some of their signs are kind of on the edge of, so that's really under the leave no trace, people aren't supposed to be installing things like that. Okay.
well, yeah, the obscenity and the other stuff is, I don't think we can have that in a public park. So, and there's some political stuff even in it, on issues.
Well, I think even if, I mean, contents notwithstanding, I think the policy is you just can't go and put stuff in the
Right.
parks now. Running it by
So-
works at least.
I don't know if this isn't really a maintenance thing, or perhaps it is. It gets more into the signage, which Bennett will be talking about a little bit later, but there was a car parked in the fire circle. I was there for, I don't know, almost a half an hour doing other stuff, and the car never left. They were, it looked like a gathering of some sort with kids making a fire and stuff, but perhaps there should be a better sign at that drive area so that there's not, I mean, it was a holiday walk and it was just not fun to see a car in the middle of the park, because it kind of is in the middle of the park when you see the cars there. And so, yeah, just maybe a better sign of 5-minute drop off only or something like that. Otherwise people are just going to take advantage of it if nobody's watching. The other issue which is there, and I guess elsewhere, is the split rail fence, and just wondering what the time frame will be. There's some warning cones there and some tape, and so it's not really again a pleasant sight, and it's right beside the shelter. So I just wondered on that. And then there's I mentioned during the bird park site visit that we had scheduled, there's 2 bowl-shaped depressions near the fire area, pretty much directly across from those benches. And my wife, there's a dog walker who complains to my wife about it all the time, that she slips in there and it gathers mud and water and stuff. So I just wondered if those could be filled in.
Is that on the trail?
No, it's in the flat area just near the fire thing. And then there was a new issue which I encountered, which is, my wife warned me and I still almost slipped and fell. In the upper part of Bird Park, there's erosion, ties into the ground, but there was no hashing done on the 4x4s or 4x6s, whatever they are. And so they were actually covered in snow, and if you stepped on it, it was like, immediately your feet kind of go out from under you. So I don't know if that's something the Nature Conservancy needs to be made aware of, if they put them in, or if we put them in. If the municipality put them in, then they need something there to keep them from being, they're a real hazard, quite honestly, when there's snow. And then lastly, the thing, but this is again a whole nother subject, is the dumping just keeps getting worse and worse along Youngwood. So, but that's another issue we could talk about separately. And the last thing, sorry, is on Rob Hollow. I noticed when I was driving by, the fencing that last year during our site visit was starting to fall apart has actually now collapsed down the hill and is now on Painter's Run. Yeah, just past, well, I can send you the location exactly, but it's now, it's not on the road. It seems like there's some fencing holding it back.
Is it the vinyl fencing, Peter, or are you referring to old split rail?
It was old picket fencing or something that seemed to be on Rob Hollow to keep people from going over the edge.
Right.
If they wandered over, so they
But
wouldn't.
it's not
come
that
down.
newer looking vinyl that's
No.
up high.
I don't
Okay.
think so. I was hoping to get over and get a picture for today. I can get one tomorrow for you, Phil, and text it to you.
No problem. I'll take a loop over there.
Okay, it's past, I'm blanking on the name of that road that cuts up Kelso. I think it's just past Kelso is where it landed.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter. The, obviously to-dos for Phil, but one thing to keep in mind for us for our, design guidelines. Your comment about the hashing or some other traction mechanism on trail reinforcement, it'd be interesting to see what is the proper way to do that. And if that,
In all the hundreds of hours I've worked in Bird Park, my only injury has been walking down one of the paths, putting my foot on one of the 4x4s, and my foot flipped out from underneath me, and I flipped backwards on my head.
Yeah,
So
tip-
yeah, and I was involved in putting those in as the Eagle Scout, it was an Eagle Scout project, and afterwards because even Eagle Scout project trail construction guideline or scouting trail construction guidelines, if you were using railroad ties, they're naturally rough, but if you're using commercial 4x4s, you're supposed to do 45-degree angle cuts with a circular saw before you install them to keep some kind of traction. And we just forgot on that project to do it before they were installed and afterwards go, because once they're in the ground, it's really tough to
because
do.
your blade's in the dirt.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're actually supposed to throw them on a circular saw and just, do a 40, just cuts or a radial arm saw or something to roughen up the top.
So this is, and I should have made a. Commissioner Flynn, welcome.
Oh, that's all right. That's quite all right.
Our new liaison. This is one of the things we've batted around for a couple of years now is volunteer projects, especially with built infrastructure, end up being a headache for public works and a safety risk. And it's something we're trying to think of ways to contain, but this is a difficult thing because we have people that want to do helpful things, but if they're not managed properly, it can end up being
Yeah.
liability.
No, honestly, when I think even about the Nature Conservancy, doing great work. All adults, we're guided by adults who know what they're doing. Let alone Eagle Scouts, right? But it's still ultimately the responsibility of the municipality. It's still public property. And whatever those projects are, should be with the express blessing and oversight of the municipality, in my opinion. The question, as we were talking about earlier, is how do we understand the process and ensure that there's capacity within the municipality to oversee those efforts? Because we don't want, yes, we want Eagle Scouts to have project spaces. Of course we do, but I also don't want a half-baked project that's going to be dangerous. So how do we build out guidelines, right? That we might not implement all in one shot. But we might say over the course of several years, we're going to, go through this process of trying to implement something. And I'm speaking completely out of left field. I have no experience. I should probably ask you, what's the process now, right? I think that's probably always the first place to start is what's the process now and where are the gaps from staff's perspective? And it's a great discussion, right? Because it's not just in our main parks. There's other places that people want to do things. How do we think about that? And how do we create a funnel? Because I always say, look, I don't want to say no. What I want to say is, yes, here's how. So that we're all getting to a good place, as opposed to no, because we don't have the capacity, or no, because we don't trust you. But that means that we have to make space for staff to participate.
I think generally, like, if there's any structures involved in a volunteer project, they come through, Phil looks at them. I think I can think of multiple projects we've rejected, said you can't do it.
Right.
Trail building is one where, as we look back over the years, we've never, when someone says, hey, I want to do trail improvements, say, great. And we never say, okay, if you're going to have, 4x4s for retention, they have to have cuts in them, or just some of those little details that we
Right.
missed.
Right.
Or how do they have to be buried into the ground so they don't wash out? That's probably one we've missed over the years where we've not. And that's why it was like trail guidelines was on the list was we've just said, great, go do your trail improvement and not giving them any design criteria. Like if they're building a bridge, I mean, we had a scout who wanted to build a bridge and we just flat out said, you can't do it. Sorry, that's not an area you can put a bridge in because we have to do at some point remediation work for stormwater control and 4 or 5 years, public works is just gonna be ripping it out and throwing it away, so.
Well, I think that for me, that it's a great point is what are our standards? Right? I mean, that's kind of the first place to start is what are the municipal standards for trails? Do we have one? I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. So hey, there's a great place for us to have a conversation, right? Is what is the trail standard? Because I've been on some great outdoor trails, right? That are very well maintained, that are designed fantastically, and aren't asphalt. But then I was also just off the Montour Trail the other day, and they have a whole training circuit that's all asphalt, and that's really nice too, right? And it's like, oh, well, there's different approaches. So what are our standards? And that's something that I think that this board could have some great discussions on and come up with a policy, obviously with the help of staff, on what are our standards for trails? And then it's whether it's municipal staff doing something or it's a volunteer group doing something. Hey, knock yourselves out, just follow the standard.
So this is gonna come back around at 7:45 because it's on our list for potential priorities. So,
And hey, Rob,
yes,
could I, on the standardizing volunteer efforts and Eagle Scout projects, this came up about a year ago and I researched some standards at other places and their forums on their websites and things and ran it by Rudy. His preference was to that those seem to, I guess, cause perhaps more paperwork and bureaucracy than necessary. So I think traditionally, like with the Eagle Scout projects, Rudy and Phil give the final approval. We've had them presented at our meetings. There was one that, and we sometimes adjust them based on concerns. There was one that was completely we said you have to go back to the drawing board on because Rudy had concerns. It was a bridge, in fact, that where there was going to be stream remediation and so forth in the coming years. So I would say, Phil can, I guess, fill you in, but we did do some research on guidelines elsewhere, and it kind of just in the effort to keep it from, again, becoming too bureaucratic, it was kind of pushed to the side for now.
okay, maybe the angle is what,
Our standards.
right, so it's standards not just for scouts, but for
Yeah.
all of us to follow.
Right.
Okay, yeah, like I said, we're gonna come back to trail restoration in a few minutes. The next item, status of projects underway in parks not included in 2023 priorities. So later on in the meeting, we're gonna talk about what we've decided our 3 key items are. We're gonna talk about it every meeting, at least for a few minutes, just so we continue to progress and move forward, whatever we're prioritized with, and also that we're all aware of what the different factors are. But this I thought is important because when people ask me what is going on in such and such a place, and I don't know, they're obviously going to say, well, you're on the Parks Board, how can you not know that? So this status of projects underway, what else is going on in the parks that we're not talking about in our priorities, if at all, that's consuming tax dollars and potentially, impacting some residents for temporarily and then eventually positively that we should know about. And for next meeting, we can have a little table that summarizes these things, so we're not just off the cuff. I just didn't have it done for this meeting, but like Thornwood stream restoration, it's been ongoing I don't know what the scheduled completion date is. I also don't have a handle on the final funding number for it. So like, there's an example where somebody asked me a question about it. I don't have the high level answer for them. So that was my point of this, point of this little section, just so that everybody hears.
I would just add, my thought there is that part of the website update, is giving us the ability to like display like projects. Because that's one of the things that, I run across quite a bit is, you see local governments where they have a project and they'll just put a little, it's one of those little, boxes and you can click on it and it pops it out and says, here's the project, here's the description, maybe a picture or a drawing, whatever it is, a budget, a timeline, just some basic information so that people, if they're curious, right, they know where to go. You can go get a status update of, oh, this is the schedule, oh, it's delayed, whatever it is. That's something that's on the radar for the new website. So now, again, it takes time, right? So I don't want to overcommit anybody, but that's going to be a capability, on the website. My hope is that we will start to do those types of things so that people can say, oh, my streets, where they're doing something on that street, what is it? Right now they would have to call where, at some point, hopefully they could just go click on a map that shows a bunch of little dots. You click on the dot, it pops up a little box, you look at it, you go, oh, that's what that is.
That would be great.
Right.
The ability to click on it and see those objective items, but also what's the stated goal? What's the value to the residents? Because you can drill into the budget,
Yeah, but it
but it
doesn't.
takes a long time to find the budget item to get to the rationale as to why
Right.
we're doing this or that.
Right.
So anyway,
One thing on the thing where I get questions, or I actually got questions, is street tree pruning. And is there gonna be any kind of organized campaign? Like, I noticed one street got pruned and looked great. And, but I'd probably get questions as a Parks Board member about, what's the plan for street tree pruning? Because most of the, most people, I believe they can't touch the street trees, so they kind of sit there and look at them and.
And start sweating when the breeze blows.
Sidewalks, they're not sure what to do,
Right.
or sometimes, trees will get to the point where, you're literally ducking under them to walk down the sidewalk and. But yeah, if there's scheduled street tree pruning during a year, could we, that would be something that would be good to know.
yeah, so I thought at one point you could go to the website, find either through maps or through the forestry link, open requisitions for tree planting or tree removal. I thought that was a capability.
That sounds right.
We have a whole database of every single thing.
So for that specifically, there might already be something there, at least for removal, maybe not for trimming.
Maybe just pruning, like some of the streets, they just need to be gone down and pruned, and just people ask, well, is our street ever gonna get scheduled for pruning?
Right.
Okay, so that's the concept behind that. It's not meant to take too much time, just to bring active work up to the surface so we all know what's going on. Okay, Commissioner Flynn, Commission update.
Aside from, we have reorg tonight. That's obviously the big one. So I don't have a lot to report. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to doing this. It's be a nice change. This will be the first new board I've been with since I've been on commission. But I don't have a lot to report right now because it's been kind of quiet for the last few weeks with the holidays. But so we have the board. We have the reorganization this evening in 50 minutes. And as you and I spoke about a little bit ago, we have the board realignment work going on, which I know that Mindy, Commissioner Randy, I should say, has told you guys about. That is something that I was pushing last year. I think it is important work. Obviously, there's a lot to work out. You had pointed out, that there's concern about the trees, right? Where the trees sit, they don't necessarily sit in recreation. And I agree. And trees are very important, and we need to find a home for them. That's why we're not like just doing this like hard, quick, cut over. We're trying to say, okay, look, this is the structure we're gonna go to. Now, how do we, over the course of this next year, think through any of these fine grained mechanics that need to be addressed to make sure that, we have going into next year, 2024, more clarity that everything has a home. I think, recreation is going to be one area where this is going to be a kind of challenge because we got to think through, there's a lot of good things that you guys are doing now, right? It's like, I don't want to lose, right? The going out and looking at the parks and seeing what's happening. That's important. It's valuable to staff. It's valuable to everybody. You don't want to lose that. But then we also have boards on the other end who, and no offense, I sat on this board before I was on commission. We met once a quarter and we talked for a little bit, and it's kind of like, well, he'd give us updates on the South Garage and we're like, I'm thinking, why are we here? So
Our complaint, this board is always runs long and talks too much, works too much.
well, environmental sustainability is the same way, right? We talk for hours, but there wasn't enough structure. This is, I'm already saying more structured. But I think it's important to make sure that all of our boards work with some level of consistency, not just, for operation, well, in many respects from an operational perspective, because if we have 11 advisory boards now, that's staff time, that's residents' time, that's commissioners' time. And frankly, that's confusion for residents. We're like, I have a problem. Where do I go? Right. So let's consolidate it down to 5. Let's create more clarity and consistency in the operations so that we can communicate more effectively to residents and board members as to kind of what the expectations are, how these things work, and frankly, give staff more ability to focus on one board, and really make progress as opposed to just talking, because that happens a lot, I find. So it's really trying to just create more standards so that we can actually make progress. But there's I think a lot of questions in terms of like what topics need to be where. This is one where I want to make sure we focus on. The other one for me is mobility, right? We have a traffic board. I always tell people we have a traffic board and we have a parking board. It's basically 2 boards, for different, motion, states of motion for a car. It's like, come on, but we don't have a board that's talking about sidewalks. But we're a walking community. Does that make sense? No, it makes no sense at all. So, but there's a lot of kind of logistics of kind of legacy kind of organization that's been put in place over 40 years of this board does this, and it's kind of evolved that way. It's like, that was great. I'm not saying it was bad, but we need to kind of just rationalize, especially as we're going to go into this new comprehensive plan. Coming out of that comprehensive plan, hopefully we've got more clarity in terms of where we want to go over the next decade. And my hope is that coming out of that, the boards can have a much more tactile, kind of relationship with the comprehensive plan so that it's much more like, hey, this area of the comp plan is your guys' responsibility to focus on and be thinking about and creating policy on, because with 11 boards all going different directions, it's like we're just spinning, and it doesn't benefit anybody. So it's really there's going to be a lot of work to do there. Hopefully, as Phil, the solicitor, kind of works through some of the mechanics. I'll definitely be bringing it back, saying, okay, what do you guys think? But that's really for me kind of on my line of sight for this next year in terms of just trying to make sure that we do this right.
We're kind of going in a circle. I'm the ratings senior person, but going back, the board that's being proposed is what used to be in place.
Yeah.
And then after the 2000, but it was primarily focused on program and sports and things like that, as I understand. And then after the 2003 master plan, it looked like, well, we need to be more focused on facilities. So this board gravitated more toward, because there was, to your point, there was no facilities board.
Right.
There was no one over like the infrastructure of the city separate from programs. And like there was pieces missing, like street trees or sidewalks. So this board then gravitated toward park facilities.
Right.
And then the program got neglected. So then the sports advisory board and the sustainability boards got created because this board kind of migrated toward, hey, we have basic maintenance. The last decade of this board has been, okay, what do we need to fix? What do we need to fix? What's the next repair? What's the trail that needs, and it's been very tactical. Because that's where we need to gravitate. And now, to your point, then also other boards morphed out of the air. And now what's being proposed is to go back to what the board was like in the late nineties.
Yeah, and I think that that's where it's like, again, everything's a cycle, right? I'm sure.
But it's keeping that balance between program and facilities.
Yes.
And so, or you, like to your point, you have like a lot of nonprofits that I've been on the board of. You will have an assets and facilities committee and a program committee.
Right.
And those are, that would be, how do you get, no matter what, you can't win, but.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of where my mind is going is, you know, in this case, right, having subcommittees makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right? Not everything has to happen in this meeting. But again, like most boards, that I've sat on, right, it all happens in this one meeting and then everybody goes away. And then they come back for this next meeting and you talk and talk and talk. It's like, wait a minute, stop. We can have subcommittee meetings. Those are, and that's the other thing. We're standardizing the bylaws because I want more, more structure, but also more clarity as to, oh, you can have subcommittees. How do they work? Right? What are the requirements, right? If you're going to have, it's like traffic, traffic board is important because people go and, have specific issues to address. I need that, but I don't necessarily need that for the whole board. I need a certain segment to be able to go do that. Right? Same thing here, right? It's like, facilities programming. Could you have two subcommittees? Of course you could. That's why I want to think through these mechanics to make sure that, because again, I'm a big facilities, these infrastructure investments are important and they don't get enough attention. But I also know after being on this board for being on the commission for 3 years is that our programming, right, it could use some focus, I guess, is the way I would put it.
So that
So,
was part of that, and the master plan came out. They said particularly educational, non-sports educational programming was a gap that, because again, there's nobody looking, we're looking at park maintenance, sports advisory boards looking at field.
their fields.
So who's looking at non-sports program offerings, which they consultants saw that as kind of a gap in the city offering.
Right.
So, and there's some good stuff in that report of like where, you can see where the current boards are and you can see where the pieces are falling through.
Right, and that's the thing, right? It's like, again, I go back to, it's always a cycle, right? We'll redo this and in 20 years, they'll be like, that it shouldn't be that way, it should be this way. Okay, that's fine, but we needed to create more
I
structure.
haven't had exposure to the other way, but one thing, I think that this board is old and it's had structure for a long time. So like agendas and meetings and rotating chairs every year. And
Right.
so from just a governance point of view, this,
Mhm.
at least when I hear this board is probably one of the more structured. And
Yeah,
but this goes back, this is the way it was when I showed up in 2016. It hasn't really changed.
Yeah, and a lot of it boils down to staff, right? Who's your staff liaison? And what process do they follow? Well, that doesn't make sense, right? Especially with Zoom now, right? I want to make sure that every board meeting is consistently communicated online, clearly, so people can see how to get in, right? How to participate. And right now, it falls to the staff person. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's, this is an IT issue, or it's a PIO issue. So we need to have these funnels created so that there is more consistency. I'm a firm believer, right, in public participation. And that's why I loved it when, well, I don't love it, but I took advantage of the opportunity when the pandemic happened. I was like, go online, do it for every board and just embed it. Because it's an opportunity for us to engage, but now we need to rethink our structure so that we have a consistent way that people go, oh, I want to participate and I know how to, right? As opposed to, I have no clue. So there is this standardization that needs to happen just so that we have that opportunity for people to engage more effectively. Hopefully it makes it easier for staff, right? Once we standardize the structure, right? Agendas should be consistently the same, right? They should be displayed on the website the same. Right, the topics are different. Yeah, of course. But, roll call and quorum and all those things
Stop creating different structures. It doesn't make sense, right? We have some boards with 7, some boards with, 12. Yeah, it's like, guys, stop. It's confusing everybody.
Thank you. So while we're talking about this board reorg, does anyone have any questions or comments? Several of us have looked at the PowerPoint and the document that Planner McMeans provided to commission, I believe. So does anyone have any questions or comments about Peter?
Well, yes, so thanks for that explanation. One of the things I was wondering was how we as a board can, is there any way that you want us as a board to assist the process in the coming year, to provide input along the way? So, things that, as you know, top down is not always a good approach. So someone like, well, everybody on this board has some experience, and same with the sports board, that can help to build a better new board. So that's one question. And well, I don't know if this is related, but since you mentioned you have to go to this other meeting, I was also wondering, in terms of our priorities in this coming year, we turned in our top list on the Parks Master Plan, whether you desired any more, the commissioners in general, or you desired any more in terms of looking at all 5 years of the Parks Master Plan and what could be accomplished, which is a more complicated challenge.
I will take the second one first. There wasn't any specific request for more.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay, great.
And then on the first one, yes, very much. I expect, or I hope for, your guys' active participation and kind of crafting some of the structure. Well, not the structure, again, the organizational structure, I think we've already bedded down. Again, it's kind of Robert's Rules of Order. We're not going to change them. But in terms of, again, things like, trees, the street tree program, the parks maintenance, reviews, those types of things, right? I don't have a line of sight on what you do, right? I think having that discussion is going to be important as to, what you guys feel is important in terms of ongoing contribution. And I think, staff, saying where they get the most benefit, is going to be important, because as we go into, like I said, into the beginning of next year, we want to make sure we have a clear structure of agenda that includes those ongoing items, knowing that there's always going to be items that roll through, but there should be agenda sections, so to speak, that cover those key areas that, we want to ensure have ongoing line of sight.
So how it worked, basically there was Parks Master Plan 2003, for about 15 years, how this board function was, it would just keep going back each year and say, okay, what do we need to knock off next? And by about 16 or 17, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we started to feel like, okay, we pretty well dealt with what we can with this Parks Master Plan. And that's when the board started saying, hey, we need to refresh the Parks Master Plan, take another look at it. So if you use that past practice, you probably got 10 to 15 years worth of work in this current Parks Master Plan with each year. You can say, okay, what do we want to choose to knock off next?
Right.
So the one we really didn't get done for the 2003 Master Plan was the invasives plan, which now we're getting that done. So I think if you went back to the 2003 Master Plan, a lot of what was in there got done, but it was tactical. It was each year, okay, which ones do we bite off next?
Right.
And the public works team, did a great job over 10 or 2. The need to refresh parks, playgrounds, equipment. It was really a fairly tactical focus, because the city we got so far behind in maintaining things. My understanding, because we were focused on program.
Right.
And the maintenance blocking and tackling kind of got, not focused, not enough focus on.
Well, and I think for me, that's always been, and we were saying before the meeting, for me, it's always a question of understanding the capacity needs, right? I could go and tell you, go take out these invasive species, but the reality is that and I think Peter, we've talked about this, right? It's the whole of Bird Park, right? You can do it tactically, but the reality is that to actually solve this problem, right? It is a scale higher than what any volunteer is going to do in any one year. It's a systematic challenge. So how do we think about this from a policy perspective, right? And say, this is a policy priority. And I'll give the example with brick streets, because I think this is one that, the municipality struggled with for about 5 years of, people saying we want to maintain brick streets. But instead of saying, what's it going to take to maintain it, they got into the weeds of, well, the engineers aren't being efficient enough. They could be more efficient by doing it all these different ways. And I said, wait, stop. Let's figure out how many miles of brick streets we want to maintain as a municipality. And then let's figure out how much on average every year that costs and put that into the budget. Now, am I going to vote for that every year? Probably not. Future commissions might say no, but every year, the number for maintaining brick, which is much higher than asphalt, is at least put forward. And it should ultimately be the same thing with invasives, right? It's like, yeah, I could say I want to do something, but the reality is that this is a long-term problem. It's always going to be there. We're always going to deal with it. So how do I build a policy that says invasives are going to be funded sufficiently to mitigate them every year forever? That's a challenge.
Could I interject here? So I want to, on that, and before Commissioner Flynn has to go to the next meeting, kind of jump ahead to this 820 number 10 commission meeting message and volunteer. So Peter, you initiated this, Parks Board members going to commission meetings, making public comment. We have communication through Commissioner Flynn as liaison, but I want to take what you just talked about in terms of policy, long-term planning. My question in this number 10 is, can we go to commission, at least one of us, at least once a month? There are 2 commission meetings per month, but we don't have to go every month. But can we pick something to push on and keep in present mind of commissioners? Maybe it's invasive species and the allocation of funds that it's going to take on an ongoing basis to tackle the problem. Like, we don't have to decide necessarily right now, but what do you think about taking a more regular role in commenting in commission meetings?
Well, I think Commissioner Silverman was really pleased that we showed up the one time, Richard and I, and the commission as a whole, expressed thanks. I think my sense of it, but Commissioner Flynn, you can clarify, is that, not enough people show up to express, to give a little bit more detail. And I think we were coming from a viewpoint of, when we look at the commissioner meeting agendas, there's 5 minutes for a report on all the various boards. And so, it was just, I thought it was a little bit more strategic to be able to explain things a little bit more for the commission. And the other thing that goes hand in hand with that is to try to create some more formalized statements. We know they're non-binding, but statements from the board so that the commissioners have that to work with and saying, here's what the Parks Board is thinking by majority right now about invasives or whatever, to give you a little bit of background. I think we also did that with the deer statement recently that Rob put forward, and we put together, the street trees, and also, of course, with the prioritization list. So those are the kinds of things. Just one other quick point on the on Ian's presentation, which I mentioned really briefly, I think when I did speak at the commission meeting, is just that I really feel strongly that the makeup of the boards should be by goal driven rather than based on how many years somebody has served, or of course you want a little bit of institutional knowledge, but I think you really need to put the boards together based on what you want the board to achieve, rather than who's aging out and all that that seems a more bureaucratic way to approach it and not one that will, meet your, what you're trying to do from this, I think.
Peter, are you thinking about that slide that shows
The transition.
the transition is 9 members, only 1 is PAB?
Right, yeah, let me just put it this way. The commissioners are very aware of that. It is on our line, it's in our line of sight as well. Yes, we need to work within a certain framework to make sure that we are fair to all board members. But the roles of these boards are very important, and the goals that are established need to be highly considered as we are looking through this transition and appointing board members. Yeah, is that a diplomatic enough way to put it?
I guess, even speaking for myself, I wouldn't worry about offending. I guess you do have to because you're a commissioner, but offending individual feelings because they're serving on a board rather than picking individuals that have the skills that you need.
Yeah, no, I have expressed the same thing.
And I don't just mean that towards the balance even, it's really just the recipe for success, I think.
Yeah, no, if we don't take that into account, we will break the boards, which is
Right.
the wrong answer. So we just need to be thoughtful about the transition.
That's true too.
But like I said, the commissioners are all thinking the same thing. In terms of the public comment, I think it's fantastic. I'm all for it. My suggestion would be consistent, right, in terms of kind of strategic objectives. I would try my best to get buy-in from staff, that's something that they want to accomplish too, right? I'm a firm believer, as I've said a lot, Bill's sitting here, I'm pointing at him. Yeah, they've got a lot of goals already, right? If you guys can get alignment and then go and be talking to commission, right? It's a win-win-win. This is a consensus building exercise, right? So how do, whether it's invasives or street trees or any other particular topic, right? My goal on this board would be to be building consensus on these are things that we collectively, staff included, want to accomplish. How do we craft a message that's going to, stick with people, right? Over the next, because we want this incremental change, knowing that it's not going to happen at this meeting. It's going to happen at the next budget cycle, which is going to get funded in the next year, which might start the project, which is going to be for the next 3 years after that, right? So be thinking about what those topics are and be aware that commissioners, want to be aware of these line of sight issues, but I would be talking about it at that level of this is an issue that is ongoing. This is something that we need capacity for. Staff don't have capacity. They're doing great work, but they are stretched thin. And we are striving to find solutions, and we hope that the commission will support this effort to find these solutions, do the research, whatever the ask might be, right? But it's at that level that I would be personally approaching it, as opposed to getting too far into the weeds, unless you want to just celebrate the weeds that have been successful, right?
Right, so a balance, right?
Yeah.
Recognize accomplishments, look forward to the future. So maybe it's not every month we're going in griping or begging.
I'd be impressed.
So,
You don't feel like the guy who complains about the beer.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that is how the board has been functioning, is that we work closely with Rudy and Phil, and in the past with Mindy to, as we put the priorities together, when we put our capital improvement plan list together, we got a lot of feedback, especially from Rudy on that one, as the things that, because he had the knowledge of what's going on and also what's feasible and what is not really a capital improvement, but actually belongs in a different category. So I think that, yep.
Okay, great. So Phil, you have a few minutes to think over what's most top of your mind. Right. So 7:30, agenda item number 7, seasonal calendar item placeholder. So I was thinking about it back when we talked about deer. Thinking about it also when we talk about street trees. We order street trees at a particular time of year. It's roughly the same time every year. If we're gonna have any input into that, we need to have a discussion beforehand. Just like the deer management, the report comes out from the contractor. I think Ian produces a report right around early June. If we're gonna have any input to the subsequent deer management season, we need to have a meeting and get things going in August timeframe if it's about talking to property owners or talking to commission, whoever it might be. So it seems that there are certain topics that are annual or seasonal that we could have a time slot in our meeting structure for. And I just took a stab at a calendar here. January, here we are, we're talking about this concept of this time slot. February, Bird Park soccer field comment, Peter. Can we put you on the agenda for next month?
Yeah, I'll be ready by then.
March and April. So the Nature Conservancy, and I think we still have Sandy online. You don't have to comment, Sandy, but one of the thoughts is sometime in spring, maybe we could get an update on the work that's going on in Bird Park or other projects that are underway with the Nature Conservancy, as sort of a regular visit to bring us up to speed. May, after the meadow comes up, we could do a Pinecone Park update just to close that up. June, do we typically take July off?
That's what it's historically been since I've been here in 2015.
Okay, so deer will either be in June or August, depending on when that contractor report is available. September, street trees. And we've got a few extra months, but we also have to work in our park visits.
And there's a couple of past years where we did exactly what you said. We actually did, like in January, February, the whole year's agenda. These are the meetings, this is the agenda.
Okay.
We've done that in the past.
Okay,
I
so
could send you, we've had at least 3 years where
We've done that. Yeah.
this meeting had a full blown, here's what we have for the whole year.
okay.
I don't know if it was helpful or not. From everybody's perspective.
I mean, we can leave some placeholder that are unfilled, but I think I would appreciate looking at
I'll
that.
send you the last one I have that we did, maybe 18 maybe, or 19.
18, I think we attempted to do one 2 years ago, maybe, and it, the pandemic. Yeah, we've had years where we did that exactly. I remember at least 1 year recently where I thought we had, we agended out the whole year.
I like the idea.
There was,
Looking
you
at
had
seasonal
done-
issues.
sorry.
No, my bad. But I do really like that, because there are, from a continuity perspective, right? There are things that you want to look at, and having that line of sight, again, gives staff time to prepare and everybody say, oh, this is coming. And again, CIP, right? You were talking about that before. Yeah, again, I mean, CIP happens earlier, right? Budgets are starting to get prepared in a few weeks. Right? I mean, the thinking is already starting. So you want the conversations, frankly, in the spring, around capital spend. Because that's when budget's getting baked, not in fall. So, yeah.
Peter?
I think you actually handled what I was going to say, but I was going to say, actually CIP, and we had also did have a calendar for last year, but it was devised by the board member who had to step out, and then the Parks Master Plan kind of took over and pushed a bunch of things that were on there. The only thing, Rob, it'd be the invasives plan looking at the last meeting's notes about when he thinks he'll have that ready. So that would probably be something you could schedule in advance as well.
And the other one I thought of, scout projects, probably need some time. If it's bigger than citizen comment period, we might take some extra time to look at scout projects if there's a lot.
If you go way back, 2015 or 16, we used to keep a list of 5 to 10 projects for scouts, say, here's ones we would like to see done. And that stopped, I think that about 17 or 18.
Yeah, and back to the volunteer guidelines that Andrew mentioned. There are some other townships that I looked at that do keep lists, not just for scouts, but for volunteers. Like, here's things that we could use volunteer help on.
So I think we've got a good handle on this item then, so I'll work with Phil to get a calendar together and then kick out a draft to everybody and that will be our 7:30 time slot. Okay. Moving on, number 8, new business, any member new business.
One real simple item, for the Nature Conservancy project in Bird Park, I don't know if the city's contribute anything, but it would be nice if we could talk about maybe donating a couple of trees, 4 or 5 trees for their project. So, I mean, they got that grant from the water company, and so they're self-funding. You know, I think they got, what's it, $16,000 grant? And so far, you were great with not cutting down the trees and the old trees and things that need to get out of the way, but yeah, if we're doing a tree order and they need some trees, it'd be nice if we could maybe donate some trees to the effort.
We're on the radar to see if we can coordinate Spring Street tree, Williamsburg spring planting. And I'm gonna talk with Elaine and see, it all depends what's left on the truck, what quantity of footprint is left, so it's all, there is something in motion for it.
They've got their plan done, and I think they know what they need, so
Right.
it's just to be nice to offer. I don't know what it takes to offer, to give them 3 or 4 trees or 5 trees for that project, but certainly looking for future business to put, to your point, to follow up to get a project update. Is there something we can do to support that project?
That's a good one. So this reminds me, this would be a place where between the Nature Conservancy board members, we could probably find someone in Mount Lebanon to buy a tree for that project. Under the Nature Conservancy, it is easier, I believe, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but for them to take in a donation, they have the right taxing mechanism to do it and be able to give that donor a tax deduction. Whereas with as far as my experience with Pinecone Park, thankfully commission supplied the money. There was already someone that wanted to donate a bench. It just seemed somewhat challenging administratively to collect money that would then be used in the public space and be able to offer some sort of tax incentive to the donor absent creating a whole 501c3.
Well, you run into the state procurement rules, so if you get too much money, then if it's given to the city, then they have to spend it, then all the state procurement rules kick in. I was looking at a large project once and worked with the city attorney, and that's the issues we ran into, was that if the donor wanted to give money to the city to then do work in the park, then the city had to follow the state procurement rules, and that kind of killed the concept.
I would just argue that Bird Park is municipal property. The trees are municipal property. I hope we can come up with a couple trees for our own space. Yeah, I mean, I would boil it down to that. But
So that was,
Yeah.
yeah, that was just a thought. Yeah, I don't know if Ron had reached out to you about trees.
Yeah, early on. The helpful thing is to find a delivery path, because that's what you pay. You'll pay more in delivery than the trees you buy. So
Any other new business?
I'm not just being a straight guy.
Old business. 2023 PAB priorities. Reduce the list from December. So 6 items listed there. We
You need a scoring person?
we came to as our list of possible priorities, and we were going to cut down the list in this meeting. So 3 of them, main park master plan. Okay, so let's first question, what's the objective here? Are we trying to get to 3 items? And if so, items that fall off the list, or rather, what does it mean to be one of the top 3 items? I think we talk about it in every meeting, at least for a couple minutes, to make sure we keep some momentum and apprised of the situation. Does it mean anything other than that?
I think what Mindy emphasized, it's a group consensus that we all agree if that's what wins, that other people may have projects they feel passionate about, but you just let it go. And we all agree that this is what we're gonna try to focus on, in part for, for the city employees, people showing up. Otherwise, our meetings would go way too long, and just that it's part of it when Mindy pushed this was because our meetings were running way too long. Because we were trying to boil every ocean. So I think that was the main, when this was being pushed, was to try to focus our time and meetings.
I mean, things,
For those at home, they're working on the side on a whiteboard.
right.
So somebody written up the 6 options and then put,
Well, could I just add one more thing? For Mindy, it was also about bandwidth for her and for the municipal employees, kind of what you were just saying, Richard, but if we were working on too many things, it generated work for them as well that was kind of beyond what could be handled. That being said, there were things that came up through the year, like Rob, the Deer memorandum. So there's still room to fit some initiative. I think it's just the bigger ones. And as we look at these 6, it's what are the ones that we can really contribute to? So for example, I mean, I wonder no, I won't get into that, but
No, I know where you're going, I think, and I think we can go around and should we just go around the panel and talk about why certain things are most important in that person's mind and perhaps others not. And then I just wanted to clarify before we do the scoring. Is it effective to just we each choose 3 and we each give 1 point to those 3? Is that an effective
your
way?
chair, you tell me.
Well, I'll tell you why it's up there like that. That's what Kelly put in her email, so I was sort of boxed in on, someone that already voted, but I was gonna say like 5 points, 4 points.
3, 2, 1, where your first choice gets 3 points, your second choice gets 2 points, and we've done different things.
Okay, so
What was the ADA compliance, which park would we work on that for years? The one.
Meadowcroft?
Meadowcroft. So good example, Meadowcroft, we kept that on the top of our list 4 or 5 years, and we just kept, working it, and then city worked it, and that got things done, but that was a big project, so some of these projects take sustained focus for years.
So let's do a 3, 2, 1, meaning your first choice gets 3 points, second choice 2, third choice gets 1 point.
So let's rescore Kelly's.
I'm gonna rescore
Yeah.
Kelly's. As. Can we use hers as the tie break?
can I ask Commissioner Flynn a question before we begin voting?
Sure. Yeah.
We know the main park master plan is funded. And so would it be out of reason or a possibility to be able to consider looking at park design guidelines, perhaps being added on to that? Or would you see that as 2 separate processes?
Well, I guess I hate to do it, but I'm gonna
counter your question with a question. I'm not sure I understand what you're all thinking in terms of scope of these, because my point being is that with the main park master plan, money's going there, right? Consultants being hired. What are you guys doing? I mean, aside from engaging when the consultant needs input, why is that on your list? Because you got to the point where we got professionals to go do the work.
So really that, I think the consultants recommended about $1 million to $1.5 million of maintenance projects in Main Park and
Okay.
refreshing. So it's a big ticket number, like, Bill just talked about, we've just been trying to get the place areas resurfaced.
So you're prioritizing
Yeah.
out of this,
So we're
not,
saying that should we as a group in Main Park needing a maintenance refresh, fencing, surfaces has been high on this board's list for 4 or 5 years now. And it's been getting done piecemeal, and do kind of, we as a parks board need to just coalesce around, hey guys, we need Main Park needs about $1.5 million injection just to refresh it.
right? I don't see that as being a heavy lift. That's just advocacy.
Yeah, so before we vote, could we have discussion on all of these, Rob?
Because, and it's a very good question, because what I got to my top 3 based on, simply that, is that, okay, so sometimes we talk about stuff that, although it's interesting to talk about, it's never gonna happen.
Right.
And that became frustrating. The example being the $45 million rec center in McNeely Park. It's not gonna happen. We talked about it a lot. So what I thought was, well, let's just make sure we talk about the stuff that's actually got some traction, which the dollars show these 3 items have traction.
Yeah, and I hate to do it because this is going to be a good conversation. I wish I could stay for it, but I can't. My recommendation, just thinking about it, is where are you, can you put meat on the bone, right? Where can you make progress? Now, again, my argument would be is that the $1 million to $1.5 million is advocacy. You could do that. You don't, that's not going to take a heavy lift. That's just saying, this is a priority. We need to escalate it when it's CIP discussion. The park design guidelines. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole topic. What are our design guidelines? It goes back to the trail discussion, right? What are the municipal standards? Yeah, so how do you think about things where we can work with staff to build standards that the municipality is going to say, these are ours, for our properties, and we're going to strive to achieve them? Because again, once you build that guideline in place, that's what Phil or Rudy is going to take as, okay, it's going to cost me not $20 a yard, it's going to cost me $30 a yard because we want to do it the right way. So I need to budget for $30. Well, you know what you've just done? You've just baked in a whole process, right? You don't have to go fight it at the CIP because they're already baking it in. So where are those types of projects that you can make that structural improvement to the thinking that's going to have long-term impact, as opposed to trying to chase something that might not get done? And again, I don't know this whole list, so I'm saying this somewhat without having a background. So hopefully that's.
This group over a couple of years spent a lot of time in Main Park, and we had about a punch list of about 70 items. The consultants looked at us and said, that's a great list, and they put in the master plan, complete the Main Park. Punch
Right.
list. They added
It's
more
there,
stuff.
yeah.
And so so it's kind of like they put it back to us saying, yes, one of the priorities, Main Park is a priority, one of the top priorities for the city, and within the Main Park, complete the Parks Advisory Board punch list.
Right, which goes down to, this is a different issue. This is a capacity issue. We're not funding sufficiently to address these things, at a speed.
Advocacy for.
Increased funding. Yeah,
And that they need the budget to do the master
to
plan.
stay on top of these things so that we don't have a deteriorating.
And the sports field item, they're not just nature items, they're the whole infrastructure of Main Park, signage, everything really
Right.
And it could, you could spend 2 million.
You know, exactly. And, but you're gonna spend 2 million this year, and then you're gonna spend, 50,000 next year, and then you're gonna go through this whole, it's a process. So how do we get them? How do you build policies that are going to get them thinking about it from a funding
Yeah,
perspective?
so versus waiting to fix things until they're broken versus the park just needs a refresh. That's what that kind of one was.
Yeah, makes sense. Good luck. This looks like a good one. I look forward to hearing the outcomes.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you all. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks.
All right, so scoring will be a 3-2-1 allocation, but Peter, let's talk about each item first. Main Park Master Plan, we just kind
Yeah,
of kicked that off. Richard, do you want to continue?
yeah, no, it goes back to 2018 when we really started inspecting Main Park in earnest, the Parks Board at the time. And we ended up building up this spreadsheet over 3 years. It had all, it was when I pulled my scouting manual out. We ended up building a spreadsheet, Bill, they got a lot of them done, but there were still a lot of open items. And when the consultants came in to do the master plan, they said, well, here, can we see your spreadsheet? And then they said, yep, those all make sense. Plus, here's some more items. And in the master plan, they put complete the Parks Board punch list and do these other items like replacing the fencing along, along Cedar that's all rusty, some of that. And when you add it up and you add up what they said to do, it's probably $1.5 million to $2 million of repairs and capital improvements. Doors on the kiosk, concession stand, some of those need to be replaced, they're skewed. That's a couple grand, $4 or $5 grand, just probably to replace a door.
Peter,
So that's one item, it's just trying to bundle all those into a single campaign that Main Park needs a refresh, including signage.
okay, Peter,
I would take to Commissioner Flynn's point, which is they're funding a master plan. It's just kind of like with the Parks master plan that, or even the invasives work, we're waiting. You have to have a plan in place so it's not kind of helter-skelter and so that it's which has been part of the problem with Main Park, and so that it has an overall consistent design. And I would think that the master planner, that would be part of what their directive would be, is to identify all of these things and, based on the materials we have at hand, but also on their own expertise and whatever process they use. And then also figuring out a plan for, which was missing a little bit from the Parks master plan, a plan for how to put that in place. So I think during the planning process, since it's funded, we can provide input as to, the areas like we think, please don't ignore maintenance, and the scale of that and what is needed. But at the same time, I do agree with the point Commissioner Flynn was making, that if it's funded and it's underway, honestly, to jump ahead, I feel a little bit the same with the invasives. It's a great concern for all of us, but we're a little bit in a holding pattern now while it takes place. There's individuals who are going to be called upon to work with him occasionally, but I don't know that we need to be working on it as a board until it's done. And then we go to advocate it.
Is there something funded for Main Park?
$30,000 for Main Park Master Plan. And my understanding was it's from the tennis center all the way down to the baseball field. It doesn't include the rec center work. That's a different project, so. This is a study of the area from tennis courts all the way down to the end of the baseball field. And the other end of Cedar.
Where'd that come from?
It was in the Parks master plan, I think, and but I'm not sure what the momentum was behind the commissioners funding it. But I mean, again, I think it is. There's a lot of people who feel that the main park is kind of, doesn't look planned in a lot of ways.
So this is my point, right? Tenured member of our board, wasn't aware of that. So, like,
Then the planner was hired.
that, yeah, well, maybe not hired yet, but the money's allocated. So my thought is, we at least have to keep tabs on this thing. Even if it's just a mention of, well, they're still looking for a vendor. Or whatever the case is, meaning for the contract.
I think one of your priorities was to have a main park master plan done.
Yeah.
And that's what that is.
But, okay.
You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure if you look in the budget,
So
it'll
it's
say,
really, it was trying to
which
do
priority.
this, like pulling together a comprehensive effort versus piecemeal
I believe
projects.
so.
So that's we basically, that's what
That's
we're
what you
getting.
asked.
We asked for it and we got it. So it's written perfectly.
I'm not sure you even know about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe the title of it is off or something that's not clicking right, but I'm pretty sure if you go to the budget, we list what your priorities are in each description. Like,
Okay.
we say, here's a project, and by the way, this is number 2 on Parks Board, this is number 1.
Well, that may tie back to the consultants had that
Right.
do the parks board, and we had a lot of punch list items in that stretch. Everything from cutting those trees down to some of the other issues. Okay.
So the question on this is, what value can we add between now and this Parks Master Plan being finished? Main park.
We add a lot of value to the Parks Board master plan. You know, the amount of input from this board to the consultant and how it influenced their analysis was pretty high.
Do we have any say in who the consultant would be? I mean, as a board.
We did for the master plan, we
But
were
for
like,
this one,
I don't know for this, I assume we would.
Like, this is what I think he was trying to ask. What's the need of it? Like, for us to have it as our priority, what we can actually do? It's about a valid question.
Rudy invited us to review the RFP and to also assist with the selection. So that for the invasive plan, so it wouldn't be unlikely that the same would fall over.
The Parks Master Plan was the same thing, so like, you have planning expertise, there was a couple of us appointed to sit on the group that actually interviewed the bidding contractors, and we voted. So there was, I think, myself and Jonathan were Jonathan was a emeritus member, but we were on the team that actually voted for and selected the consultant.
Okay, so
So I would assume a similar thing here, that we would appoint 1 or 2 people from PAB to help support the consultant selection.
Okay, so RFP, selection of consultant, and just advocacy, continued advocacy.
Right.
Because if it gets done, then next year we need money to
So
actually.
like when the consultant was doing the Parks Master Plan, when that spreadsheet came out, I think Elaine or I or somebody sat down with them and went through all the items and said, this is what this list is.
Okay,
And there was a lot of input on Main Park. You know, that was all occurring behind the scenes. It wasn't being done in PAB meetings, it was being done outside.
okay. Danya or Bennett, any comments on that one, Main Park Master Plan, or questions? More, we have to move on to the next one.
I mean, my understanding was basically that we would pull off the Parks Master Plan and then develop one for this.
Okay.
So which is why it became a priority. And so, but now with Commissioner Flynn talking, I'm like, should we focus on the guidelines, like the park design guidelines? Because then that kind of, feeds into the master plan, because if we have that, and then at some later date, maybe 2 years down the line, we have the park design guidelines done, and it doesn't match up, then, we're talking about the problems, like what you mentioned, the Eagle Scouts, and we're missing the details. So after that conversation, I'm like, should we be focusing on the, the second one and the trail restoration guidelines and the forestry invasive plans, stuff that we talk about constantly but don't have a structure. to fall back upon. So and because Brafferton has funding allocated, Main Park has funding allocated, so I don't know, I'm confused at this point in
Yeah,
time.
it's a good point. In terms of that relationship with park design guidelines, they kind of go together. You could argue the opposite and say, well, no, if they do the main part properly, then
Then
that
we
can then
pull
be a
that.
template to be extracted and put into a guide to be used other places.
That's true too.
So I see the challenge there.
Well, and you could break the park design guidelines into pieces, because we have nature areas, we have, pocket parks, and then we have, can't remember what the three categories are. You could tackle one of the categories, like, for the smaller pocket parks, what should be the design? So you could break that into pieces too.
Yeah, I actually disagree a little bit with that, I think that's part of the issue, and I think we need a unifying design that takes into account the differences, just like Bennett and Kelly are looking at signage and taking into account the difference in the parks. But I think we really do need an overall park design to make, well, I've already, and I think Kelly's also talked about that, just about what the importance of that is. And I kind of like what you were saying there, Danya, about how it could fit into the main park plan too, or it might be a problem to delay one and too far down the road while the other one takes place. So it's hard because they're all important. And even Brafferton, even though it's funded, there's aspects to it that are still a little bit unresolved: the parking, the access, the playground. But I kind of like, again, what Commissioner Flynn was saying about taking the things that are the big picture kind of guidelines. So I think I do feel like we've been missing that a bit.
So can we talk about Brafferton for a second? The fence has been replaced, the batting cage is gone, and
No fencing has been replaced. The outfield, we'll call it outfield. There's no more backstop. We ripped the backstop out. We ripped the outfield fence out ourselves.
okay,
So
so
we
removed but not replaced yet.
correct. So the remaining scope of it is not fully clear. But what I'm looking at is already getting numbers to regrade the infield portion. There's still a noticeable lip in some spots. There's some stuff that needs moved to make sure it's a playable field. I mean, there's no question that it drains from left to right very well. It's just the fact that we had a skin portion with no crowns, no turf to absorb that water. So, once you get that back in, but outside of that, to answer your question about playgrounds, designs, parking, all that, I don't think there's anything in place tangible for that, but also I think there's a price tag of like 80,000 or something. 80,000 isn't going to touch a parking lot, all that type of infrastructure. So,
Gets you the design.
right. So I think they're
72,000.
they're saying there's an $8,000 credit from the work that Public Works did.
Okay,
Just to acknowledge that a small little portion of that was done.
so what activity could this board do to help Public Works or to help the effort? If we were to take this on as one of our priorities.
Probably communication and advocacy, and I would imagine that this is probably gonna lie in the planning department, for some point. You're talking about re-networking an entire property.
Yeah, it needs to be redesigned. The neighborhood needs to get input to that design process.
We've done early
Yeah.
neighborhood stuff. but not
Yeah, that's,
a lot.
but the things like you point out Williamsburg, if they felt like they didn't get input or not, but that one definitely, that's a kind of a permanent thing where the local neighborhood needs to be involved.
Okay. So I thought since work was underway here, it would be top of mind for people in the community
Should finish.
Right, like Meadowcroft. Push, continue momentum. So that's why it was near the top of my list, but
You know, on the other hand, as I heard Phil talking there, though, I was thinking those things should all be done within again, an overall design plan. That would make, you know, a design of a park planning guide would maybe deal with some of that. You know, in terms of what goes in the playground and things like that, and even where that signage goes and so on.
We took care of things that were concrete to us. Baseball, softball wasn't an ask of the facility anymore. That means the backstop can go. If you're not playing baseball or softball, you don't need a home run fence. There's a small negative slope hill that comes down. It doesn't pose a hazard to leave that without a fence. The hazard is the fence. Remove that. So that line of thinking left us where we're at with how Bradford currently sits.
So it's back on the drawing board with Gateway at the moment.
I don't know if there's any further concepts. I can reach out to probably planning, Ian and Greg, and see if see where we're at with it. But yeah, there's obviously funding for it. So, but yeah, to your point, Peter, a nice plan of what, you know, what's everyone want to see there is important, especially when you're talking about property fencing and establishing boundaries, grades. That plays into
like, if it's gonna be a lacrosse practice field for you, what space do they need? Where can there be a fence where from that point, and then where's the playground? If we're gonna put a playground in, what should be done with that? There's a lot of design work that needs to probably be done for that park. You know, before, okay, then to Peter's, but once you have the playground, well, what's your design spec for playgrounds? We don't even know if we're gonna put any kind of size of playground, so it needs a design.
this really would benefit from the combined parks sports board. This one in particular would be.
Cause like Rudy put out, there was a design for a parking lot already done. It was done
Right.
years ago. There is a design, it's still usable for if you want to enhance parking, what it would take. So that piece of the design is done. It's what you do with what do you want to do with the field now that it's officially no longer a baseball, softball facility.
I think if I recall, the public, the surrounding community was not thrilled with the parking design because it would take up some of that flat space and playground space. That's why that meeting was held. Unfortunately, none of us were able to attend.
Okay, trail restoration and guidelines. I mean, we had a topic tonight, the hashing on stairs.
Would that, I guess, maybe I mentioned this at the last meeting, could that fall under park design guidelines? Or is it a completely separate issue? I know it's something Kelly was pushing especially.
If you're breaking the park design into the nature base, the pocket parks, then wouldn't trail restoration fall into the nature parks?
I think it fits into park design guidelines. I don't know how you categorize things, but I think it
Makes sense
fits
to,
in.
if you're breaking apart the park design in guidelines into specific for each different parks that we have, then I feel like the trail would fit in with them. Because then we're repeating things.
So can we then just move this under here?
You know, like
And
the sub,
eliminate trail restoration and guidelines as a separate item and just fold it into.
Like, how do you design a sports field? You know, what our park design standards include, you know, sports playing surfaces, it's comprehensive. You're getting into, you know, how do soccer fields need
That wasn't
to be
easy.
designed and built? How do you need to have baseball fields? What's your specification on fencing? You know,
Well, I don't,
Interesting. I don't think that was the original genesis of that. It was more along, I remember we were talking about landscaping.
yeah,
Shrubbery.
to me, it was more looking at it and saying, we're gonna wholesale these benches. You have 6 different styles. Here's our adopted
garbage
style.
cans.
Each bench comes with a concrete pad and a, or, you know, that's how I was.
Yeah, almost more
thinking you were going with it.
aesthetic stuff. there's some functionality too, but it wasn't, well, you need 6 inches of.
That's important too.
It is, I mean, it totally is, but the scope of it becomes the whole department.
Yeah, yeah, we have to be careful of mission creep. But I think the trails make sense, but it also fits in to the connectivity issue with which the township seems to be very interested in. So it would be something, again, that's designed, it would take in ADA, which, but it,
So you want to keep that as a separate item then and not fold it in, or?
no, I think it works under parks, but I don't know if Kelly would feel differently, but for me, I think it works together.
So we'll keep it inside then for voting. That is a combined topic. Communications and signage, we talked a fair amount of that. I think we have a handle on that. Bennett, do you want to comment at all relative to communication and signage from the standpoint of will we be talking about it every week as a priority, and will we advocate stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a good question how far we want to go with it. We'll share the update soon on what we've done so far. Mostly we've focused on park identifiers, parking, wayfinding, right? And we've got a pretty comprehensive view of that already, I think. Not the design work yet. So if we think it needs to go beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And the final one, Court. Oh, sorry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just to add to that, the funding right now is just in place for kind of the low hanging fruit. So, but I don't know if it's something that we want to, put on our priority to advocate for the funding. If Bennett and Kelly have already kind of, and worked with the sports board to identify what needs to be done. But yeah, so I'm not sure. The only other thing I would say is, again, I think it's also communications, but I don't know how much we can do as long as the website is in work in progress. And
Communication is a good point because we're not working on communications right now. We're
Yeah.
strictly talking about signage and wayfinding.
but we still do have a major, problem where people aren't aware of the resources we have. So
Mhm.
as witnessed by the forestry consultant last time.
Any comment on communication and signage?
I feel like it's a very important part of what we're doing. I mean, if we're talking about universal design guidelines, then that needs to stay on. It's something that they've been working on, so.
Forestry and invasives funded, we have a consultant. And that's the forestry and invasives plan. I think it's important to keep the pressure on and advocacy for the funding to implement in the subsequent years. And I like, there was a conversation about street trees, but the same thing goes for invasives, which is we can help commission understand the per acre cost based on obviously the consultant's product, but also, other experience, so that we can sort of get them in the frame of mind of, well, Phil and Eichenlob are out there for 5,000 to 7,000 for the last, so many years, and this is the progress they've made, and this is what it takes to, get X amount of acreage. And
We've been stuck in this loop for literally 20 years, since 2003, that we can't go out to bids for invasives control because we don't have a plan. And so we finally are getting a plan done so we can go out to bid. So the follow through, is kind of important.
so, any other comments on that one?
I don't know how we can reduce the list to just 3. just feels like every,
Yeah,
Sophie's choices.
I mean, the alternative is we take a couple of these per month when we don't talk about everyone every month.
Yeah.
Or maybe we have a subcommittee option.
You can't talk about, but it's just like the three that we agreed we would try to talk about every month. This was from Mindy's advice, as you reflecting, watching us as a group,
Okay,
that we weren't focused enough. Because we felt there was too many things, and it's a tough thing to do.
so the list is now 5 items. We talk about 3 every month and then have 2 that we're going to slot in. Or we're gonna alternate.
If you're doing your annual agenda, you put it in maybe twice, you
Yeah.
touch on those.
So it still goes down to the prioritization as to which ones we hit on, so.
And the main park master plan, we're saying, would be to work with the help select the consultant and work with them to develop the main park specific plan.
So this is, this is up for, I guess, Ian to decide to involve us or ask for our help. But it would be RFP, selection of consultant, advocacy for funding. And answer questions if that's what they want of us. I mean, I don't know how they would do it.
I don't know if we want to defer the vote till we find out more. Or do you want to just take a vote and see where we fall?
Hard to do. We should,
Since we're not knocking any off, that's the challenge. I mean, we can put together a calendar with all of it. And it's just a question of how much time, because the thing is, it's staff time, it's also our time. If we don't bring anything to the table to present or production, it's a pretty short bullet item, it's like, and that might be sufficient, and I think that's okay too.
Well, I think that point about not having to mention things every meeting, given that the other boards are meeting quarterly and we meet every month. Yeah, I like it when we have, just like right now, where we have time to go in depth on things and have time to discuss. So I think a lot of the reporting could just be done, on the side or through emails.
Okay, how about this? How about we take a vote? But all it means is that's influence to how we sort of parse out this work. It doesn't mean we're eliminating anything.
no, it's where you're focusing. It's not eliminating, it's really saying this is where your energies are. You're gonna try to get consistently, at least maybe keep the energies through the whole year on that topic.
Right.
Versus bounce around and be, fish going after every shiny lure that flashes each month.
Right.
I mean, we used to have meetings that ran 3 hours because we would go topic to topic and we would just get in depth on too many things.
Okay, so
You are so patient with us.
let me pose a question on the park design, which now includes trail. What are we going to actually do? I would think maybe you start with an outline of what you want it to include. It may expand, over the course of years, but one of us is gonna actually have to do it. Who wants to do it? Is really.
I would work on that. I think Kelly would as well.
wouldn't mind doing that either.
Yeah, I think it's developing a scope of work and then advocating to get it funded.
Okay, so we are to be invited to participate in Main Park Master Plan. Right, Ian needs to ask us to participate in the RFP /selection / answer questions of the consultant. We are a driver of park design guidelines and trail restoration. We can start that ourselves. We are invited, but also consulted for the forestry and invasive plan because we've already kind of gotten ourselves in there.
We're the sponsor of that.
Yeah, we're the. That's even better. Communication and signage. We are a.
There's multiple parties in that.
Yeah, so we're a participant. We got too many acronyms, too many letters here. So from that standpoint, we have a subcommittee working on park design guidelines, and we get an update monthly. This is Kelly, Peter, whoever else on here who wants to participate. And then this, we're kind of at the beck and call of Ian. And this, we can focus more on because we're already involved. You know, it's really something.
Well, in Brafferton, if you look kind of, our role, we're an advisory board, and it's really to advise on, how do we redeploy that property? I mean, that almost fits right into the core of what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay. So is that, so on Brafferton, just how does it, what does it look like? Ian asks us to participate in a community forum about Brafferton? Like what is gonna happen? What are we gonna do? Is my question. Yeah, I think it's important because there's money associated to it and there's work happening.
It's changed
But what do-
with Ian. In the past, we had very little interaction with the city planner. We would drive stuff. Ian seems to be, especially the last year or two, saying like, no, he wants to drive it. So I think part of it is just clarifying what is our role versus Ian, where,
Well, and it was hard to get an answer from Mindy. I think I asked twice, what are the next steps? And she was going to check with Ian, but we never really got an answer on that. And I can go on the record saying publicly that I was a little disappointed because I asked if I could attend that as just an observer, and I was told not to because there would be too many Parks members there. And then Danya was out of the country, and I wasn't told that there weren't any members. And then Mindy was surprised that there were no Parks Board members at the community meeting. So yeah, so I'm not sure, again, all this as an advisory board, it depends on, we're at the commission and I guess the municipality's pleasure. So, but we can still pick what's priority for us, I guess.
We have 4 minutes.
I'd say let's just vote.
Now, let's just vote in the manner of 1 point.
So are we saying that we're also a participant in the Brafferton restoration? Or
There's a question mark.
I think we should maybe we need to reach out to Ian and say, okay, where does this stand? Where do you need support from the Parks Advisory Board? Because I mean,
There's
it
nothing
depends.
to do.
As the members have changed, like you have some design skills, we would actually do basic designs and say, here's conceptually a design we think you should start from or consider. And we would actually do our engineer, we had engineers on the Parks Board.
I
We would
can
do
reach out to
engineering.
Ian on that,
Yeah,
and find out where we are in terms of are we.
So
part of the
maybe it's
advisory board is
premature.
supposed to be free consulting for the city in a way, so that is where we can help.
So maybe it's premature to vote then, because we're not sure what our involvement would be if we were to choose one of these.
Yeah, we probably do need feedback from Ian on the Brafferton and Main Park.
Yeah, put another
What
aspect.
is, or does he just say, look, I'm the planner, I really don't need your advice, which is fully he's empowered to do.
So
I don't want the advisory board wasting time on those two things. I've got those, you go work on signage.
okay, that's what we're gonna do then.
Okay, so
We-
I'll reach out to Ian tonight and let you guys know what he says.
Do you want to ask for both items?
Yeah.
Main Park Master Plan and Brafferton Restoration. Thank you, Tanya.
And some of them maybe would help me. I have no idea what a design guideline looks like. I know I've had training on trail construction, so I know like what trail guidelines, but I have no clue what, if somebody who has knowledge on what is a design guideline even. Or like find an example from another city that they could circulate. Cause I don't even understand kind of what that would be.
You basically listed it out. It's basically breaking it down into components and then detailing it out like completely. So you're not, I mean, you might miss some things, but it's avoiding all the loopholes. Like, so when somebody picks up, they know. I mean, I'm more familiar with urban design guidelines where a storefront design or how the signage should be, you're eliminating loopholes. So it's more consistent with what a Main Street restoration should look like.
It'd be great if we could find a couple of cities who have park guidelines or something and just share, here's examples.
There's also examples that exist for state parks and national parks that could be used.
But at Boy Scout camps, there's a national guideline that how you construct a youth camp, but I don't know, yeah, that's getting into like structural issues, like what do you construct things out of and.
It's a big topic. So, okay, we're good. Thank you, Danya. You'll let us know and then we'll revisit this. Bennett, anything on communication and signage that's urgent to deliver to the board? Because I realize I've blown up a timeline for this go.
I couldn't make out the full question there. Anything with the communication side?
Communication and signage that's urgent to communicate to the rest of us. this
Oh,
evening.
no, nothing urgent. We do have we divided them up. We visited all of them, marked where there are signs, where we think there needs to be signs, consolidated that. Peter looked at it today. Me and Kelly are gonna get back together to make ours more consistent, and then we'll share it with this whole group, I'd say between meetings.
Great. Next one, has there been any additional communication that we should know about with Tim Nuttall from Wicos?
No, we weren't expecting anything for this meeting.
Okay. And then regarding that commission meeting message and volunteer for Jan 10, for some near-term commission meeting, taking Andrew's, Commissioner Flynn's advice. What do you think, Phil? What does staff think? We have that to think about, but could you give us some insight on what's on your mind that we might have a role in?
As far as your priorities,
That in part, but really in terms of communicating to commission about the capacity needs of, giving Public Works more capacity to do stuff.
well, I think your bullet number 9 would drive a lot of that.
Okay.
I hate to circle back and say that, but the important thing to me is, we just heard that, the communication of Williamsburg wasn't the best. This Bradford thing just screams opportunity for otherwise.
Community engagement, yeah.
There you go.
Right, so I think you do something really good and you nail that,
Okay.
would be my opinion. That would be something I think, it's tangible, there's money, it's happening. There's a little bit of direction, but it obviously when.
The neighborhood's been pretty consistent over the years of what they said they wanted, like when we would do park visits, you get the same message pretty consistently 4 or 5 years, so. They seem to know what they want, it's just somebody needs to get it kind of designed in front of them, saying, is this for sure what you want?
All right, well, okay.
I do think that's a big one, just because it was a product of the master plan that, you have an opportunity of a giant flat space in what is called Mount Lebanon, which is a hill. So, do it right and, get the best input and knock that one out.
I should have come to you 10 minutes ago. We could have saved all.
Well, and everything on there is good. It all needs done. There's no arguing that,
Okay. Thank you.
But that to me would be helpful to keep driving that and keep on it and just see where
So is it
our group fits in it.
the new Meadowcroft potentially?
Well, I'd love to see that done too, but that, you know, we're one phase away over there.
Yeah, Rob,
You need to take a 3 or 4 year time horizon. It's gonna take 3 or 4 years to get property done.
Rob, to your point, I think, which is about, do we speak to the commissioners? I think like the signage is a good one. Once that document's done and we've looked at it and commented on it, Kelly and Bennett could take it to the commission meeting and present it formally and say, I mean, obviously it'll be circulated through communications department, public information office and all that, but still it would be good to share with commissioners, here's work that we did together with the sports board. Here's the outcome, and we would like more funding to get all these signs in, so we have a good uniform look to our parks.
Good. Okay. Yeah, the next commission meeting is January 10th, and then I think the following one would be the 24th probably. Is it feasible to think we can do that? Or do we need another parks meeting to review the material and sort of give it our thumbs up? And that's fine, it's just,
Yeah, I don't know that we need another meeting. We'll circulate so everybody can see it and weigh in on it. But I don't know that it'll require a whole lot of discussion. So I think the 24th is feasible.
okay, that would be great, so we'll pencil.
Well, actually, you know what? Let me walk that back. Because our next step was to talk to that Clavin, to come up with the designs for that. So that'll probably take longer than for us to both circulate it internally and get it to Clavin and get work back from them. That's probably gonna take longer than that date.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll look at it for maybe the early February one.
Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts on that before we close? All right. Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
That tree in Bird Park that fell down is in a really awkward spot for, you know, just.
That's what it sounded like, because I
It is bad.